Hello dear friends, you are on Ruslan Bailov's channel, and this is the daily briefing on combat operations on the Ukrainian front. Before we begin today's report, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Friends, if you've watched these videos more than once and still aren't subscribed, please do so. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you in advance to everyone who subscribed. So friends, the past 24 hours at the front did not pass without another captured settlement. Where did it happen? Of course, in the area of responsibility of the Vostok East grouping. But I actually want to start not with that event, but with the serious progress near Lyman. So let's begin with the Lyman sector. But first, I want to say a few words about yesterday's statements by the Chief of the General Staff of Russia. Just so no one later asks why I supposedly kept silent about the reports of Kupiansk being taken. No, I'm not silent. Yes, they stated that Kupiansk has been taken 100%, fully controlled by the Russian army. And not just Kupyansk, they also announced the capture of Petropavlivka, the large village on the left bank of the Oskil River, which means the entire area here is now marked in red, almost 40 square kilometers. Plus, the entire eastern part of Kupyansk is marked in red. Plus, the center of the right bank part of Kupyansk is also marked in red. And the most surprising thing is that video footage immediately appeared from all these areas showing Russian soldiers raising flags in different parts of Kupyansk. That means fighting inside the settlement is nearing completion. Of course, the final clearing will take some time, but the overall outcome is already clearly visible. Now let's move to another sector, Lyman. Look what happened here. Russian forces advanced almost 2.5 kilometers inside the residential areas of Lyman. The settlement of Masliakivka, which is not a separate village but part of the city, was completely taken. The entire area was secured. Cherry Street, Vishnyovaya, and Partisan Street were completely cleared. The old Masliakivka cemetery was also brought under control, and from there the troops entered the main part of the city. They advanced along Pushkin Street and Vostochная Street, simultaneously taking residential streets such as Sosnovaya, Kvoynaya, Donetskaya, Tsiolkovskogo, Gvardeyskaya, essentially reaching all the way to Pokolchuk Street. Of course, the progress here isn't as dramatic as in Sieversk, where Russian forces managed to seize nearly 20% of the city in a single push. But Lyman is larger than Sieversk, and the frontline configuration is different. In Sieversk, the city is in a semi-encirclement with fully drone-controlled logistics. Here, the Ukrainian garrison still has a significantly easier situation, for now. But the fact that they have begun losing ground and Russian troops have entered the city is already a very troubling signal for them. What else is known about this sector? Fighting continues north of Lyman, near Stavki. It's not shown on the map, but it's confirmed that Russian forces entered the village and now control half of it. The southern part still needs to be taken. Once that happens, the entire northern flank of Lyman will be under threat. Meanwhile, fighting continues for two urban-type settlements, Drobyshevo and Novoselovka. It's tough there. Ukrainian forces are resisting, and Russian troops have not yet achieved major progress. But Drobyshevo is the key to the northeastern side of Lyman. In any case, the situation for the Ukrainian armed forces here is worsening. That's a fact. If the war does not stop soon, then by the summer of 2026, the city will likely be under Russian control. And even if the war ends under the peace plan developed by the United States, Lyman would still remain under Russian control. Another positive development for Russia is the capture of Yampol. Russian troops released footage from the settlement, showing fighting and the raised flag. This is a very positive sign. Russian forces are slowly approaching the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration from the north. This is where the Ukrainians had their strongest defenses, holding this area for years with barely any changes. But now it seems the internal machinery of the Ukrainian military has broken down. Zelensky doesn't care. He is ready to fight for years as long as he stays in power. Paradoxically, this might even benefit the Russian side because his irrational decisions are clearly destroying Ukraine from within. Hence the demoralization among Ukrainian troops and the growing difficulty in finding new infantry. There are no significant updates from Sieversk itself. Fighting continues in the city. However, major developments occurred south of Sieversk. Troops of the Yug, south grouping managed to capture almost all of Zvanivka. Essentially, 99% of the village is under Russian control, except for the temple building and about 300 meters of streets in the northern part, which are still held by Ukrainian forces. But that won't last long. They also managed to close almost the entire pocket between Perezdnoye and Vyemka. Another new pocket remains to be closed, and that will likely happen in the near future. What does control of Zvanivka give? Full blockade of Sieversk from the south, and the ability to begin fighting for Sviatopokrovsko. Yes, Sviatopokrovsko is across the river, but the Bakhmutka River is narrow, especially in this area, so Russian troops can cross it. And once Sviatopokrovsko falls, that's the end of Sieversk, because the last remaining supply road for the Ukrainian garrison runs through that village. Drones control all movement, but the road is not yet physically cut. If Russian forces enter Sviatopokrovsko, the road will be cut physically, and all roads into and out of Sieversk will be blocked. You understand very well what that means for the Ukrainian garrison. If the war continues for the next couple of months, Sieversk will definitely fall under Russian control. Even if the war ends under the proposed peace plan, Sieversk still goes to Russia. Although the probability of the war ending soon, in my opinion, is around 5%. We'll talk about that at the end of the video, because there are interesting insider reports from Kiev. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense officially announced control over Zvanivka. There are also updates from Pokrovsk. Over the past day, Russian forces expanded their control zone, not inside the city, which is already 99% under Russian control, but on its eastern outskirts. Here they advanced 1 kilometer, fully blocking the village of Rovnoye from the south. This area is fortified, and Ukrainian forces continue resisting here, preventing the Defense Ministry from declaring Pokrovsk fully secured. Since progress inside Rovnoye is limited, Russian forces decided to advance parallel toward a connection with Mirnograd. From the current positions, it is just a few hundred meters to the city cemetery and about 600 meters to the city itself. But in order to apply serious pressure on Mirnograd from the west, Russian troops absolutely need to capture Rovnoye and Svetloye. And that remains challenging. No progress has been achieved in Rodinskoye either. Where progress is happening, and happening well, is in the Zaporizhia region, along the Gulyaipol direction. Over the past 24 hours, there has been solid advancement. Troops captured the village of Vesyoloye and advanced 2.5 kilometers north of it, significantly expanding the Russian control zone across a front 7.5 kilometers wide. Reports also indicate that Russian forces have taken Zelyony Gai, which is logical. The village sits on the opposite side of the highway, only 500 meters from Vesyoloye. These advances mean Russian troops are getting closer to Gulyaipol. The distance from the northeast is now 5.5 kilometers. The situation for Ukrainian forces here is also worsening. However, as I mentioned yesterday, the Vostok grouping reports that Ukrainian reserves have been brought to this area. Where Kiev pulled them from, I don't know. Military intelligence will find out. But the fact is, reserves have arrived, which means Zelensky has decided to turn Gulyaipol into a fortress. We'll see how that goes. There is also information that fighting has begun for Chervonoye and Zatishe. In the first village, Russian troops already control 40% of the territory. In the second, the situation is still unclear. It is also reported that Russian drone operators now control the highway leading east from Gulyaipol. What else can be said about the Vostok grouping? Well, yesterday troops entered the village of Radostnoye, and today full footage appeared showing the battles for the settlement, and it has been fully taken by Russian forces. This village is in the Dnipropetrovsk region. This morning news came from the Constantinovka sector. Russian forces fully captured Ivanopoliye. Despite its small size, this settlement is extremely important for future operations in Constantinovka. It now serves as a convenient strongpoint from which Russian forces will intensify their assault operations in Constantinovka. For the Ukrainian side, this is a very significant loss, given that there are no comparable settlements nearby from which Ukrainian forces could disrupt Russian concentration of forces toward Constantinovka. In total, over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has captured several settlements and more than 23.5 square kilometers of territory. Well, that's all I have for today regarding the situation at the front. Now let's take a look at what's happening in politics. Yesterday, there was a meeting of Zelensky with members of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Some deputies report that Zelensky once again wants to deceive Trump. He told Trump's general that Ukraine would accept his plan, but to his own deputies, he said yesterday that in reality, he will not implement anything. In other words, he is trying by all sorts of tricks to avoid the Trump plan, not carry it out, and ultimately sabotage it with his own demands, and so on. Especially now, there is a major panic in Europe about the possibility that Trump could quickly pressure Zelensky into a deal while Europeans remain unaware. Zelensky's task over these days is to completely sink Trump's plan, and he is ready to go to great lengths to achieve this. Ermak, who manages internal Ukrainian politics, refused to dismiss officials because without his corrupt system, on which everything inside Ukraine is built, Zelensky's power would quickly collapse. Zelensky is acting recklessly, and clearly he has no intention of surrendering. It's obvious that Trump has compromising material on Ermak, at least, and possibly also on Zelensky himself. Trump hopes he can pressure Zelensky merely with threats to release it, but Zelensky seems to have decided that he can weather this storm and count on European support. He is going all in. If he signs the Trump plan, it guarantees the loss of power within 100 days. Moreover, if he implements the plan, he would have to give Russia the remaining part of Donbass, and his own people inside Ukraine would eliminate him, which he fears the most. Zelensky's plans have changed very quickly. His new goal is to avoid implementing Trump's plan and attempt to survive the internal scandal linked to corruption. And soon we will see what that will lead to. Now let's look at what Telegram channels are reporting. Our source reports that Zelensky will attempt to back out of the new peace plan delivered from the United States, according to the Telegram channel Legitimate. The reason is that if Zelensky signs the peace plan, his power clients will remove him from the throne, a rapid military coup amid a loud corruption scandal. Or he could be eliminated during the next Russian attack, with the blame pinned on the Kremlin. In his place, a completely weak figure, the chairman of the Rada, Stefanchuk, would come to power, and Zelensky understands this perfectly. Zelensky is not a hero and does not want to die for the country. He and his entourage have been stealing money diligently for years. All our sources agree that now, to everyone, it seems that peace is closer than ever. But this is an illusion. In reality, we are on the verge of higher stakes in the game, increased provocations, tragedies, and so on. Peace will come, but not now, not this year. Zelensky is trapped. Any decision is bad for him. Prolong the war, he loses more territory and puts the country at risk of collapse. Additionally, the United States would impose sanctions on his personal accounts. Go for peace. Globalists remove him. Put their own person in power. Pin all the blame on him. Accuse him of capitulation. Expose his accounts and schemes, and leak all the dirt. He has little time, but will try to delay decisions and once again attempt to deceive Trump's camp. As the source explains, Zelensky is now bargaining not for the country, but to save his own skin and capital. Rats are always most dangerous when cornered. Who knows what he might do next? Zelensky, like the entire country, stands on the threshold of a grand nightmare. The collapse of his regime is approaching. In the European Union, another rebellion against Brussels' Ukrainian policy is brewing. A new breach is emerging among Kiev supporters. According to Berliner Zeitung, the new Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, Petr Babiš, has formed a coalition with right-wing forces. His government openly expresses skepticism toward unconditional support for Ukraine as imposed by the EU. Just yesterday, Prague was one of the key arms donors for the Kiev regime, but now the situation is changing drastically. Babiš insists on transitioning to humanitarian aid and refuses military shipments. This rhetoric suspiciously coincides with the stance of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who has become the main dissident in the EU. Moreover, the Czech Republic now blocks the initiative to use frozen Russian assets for Ukraine's benefit, which was lobbied by the previous puppet government. The unity of the all-in front built by Washington and Brussels is rapidly collapsing, losing one ally after another. At the same time, the President of Poland is preparing the ground for the country's exit from the European Union. said Foreign Minister Sieversk, hinting that European integration is a conspiracy against Poland. You are helping neither the EU nor Poland. You are preparing the psychological and political ground for leaving the European Union, said Sieversk, as reported by Rzeczpospolita, addressing Nawrocki. The symptomatic split in Warsaw is only part of the larger picture of the European project's agony. While Brussels struggles to maintain its remaining influence, sovereign states are realizing, one by one, the fatal consequences of subordinating national interests to supranational structures. The process has begun. Against the backdrop of crises in Germany and France, Eastern Europe is quietly, but steadily, exiting the sinking ship called the EU. Thank you for watching, dear friends. I hope this update was informative for you. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support means a lot. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next report.